Hi everyone. Good evening. Happy Sunday. I hope you all had a nice weekend. So I know there's a couple people logging on. So I am Laura. I am here from Learning with Laura 123. That's me. And tonight is my first night of my new parent portal. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to hop in here every week, usually on Sunday night, and give you some tips for the week or things to start thinking about in order to set your child up for success. So for the first one, for tonight's, it's all about creating an effective workspace for our students. And so I encourage you, and I'm going to give you a moment to pause here. I'm going to encourage you to go to my website because I just posted a kind of like a little flow chart for you to follow. And if you don't want to look at it now, then that's totally fine. You can look at it later. It's on my website under Parent Portal, and tonight is the first session. So if you want to follow along, you can. Again, it's on my website, which all you have to do is type in is learningwithlaura123.com. You'll get directed over there. Head over to the Parent Portal, click on it, and then tonight's session 1. So you can follow along with all the recommendations that I'm going to make tonight. Okay. So here we go. I have my list right here because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So the first thing I want you to think about when you're thinking about setting up a work spot for your student or students is your student going to be in a stationary spot or a mobile spot? And this is what I mean. So for example, one of my students I've been working with this summer, on Mondays and Tuesdays, she goes to one grandparent's house. Wednesday, Thursday, she goes to another one. Fridays, sometimes she goes and works at her mom's office. So I would recommend setting up a mobile setup for her. Stationary would be if your child is going to be at your house or at the same location every day for distance learning. So 2 very different ways of thinking about this. I forgot to mention at the beginning, anytime you have a question, just type it in because I want to hear from you guys. Okay. So think about it. It's going to be a stationary spot. Is your child always going to be at home or always going to be at your office with you doing distance learning? Or are they going to jump from one grandparent's house to maybe a neighbor's house to if mom and dad are at different houses? So you want to think about that would be more of a mobile setup. So I'm going to talk about the difference between the 2 of them today as we go. Okay, so one of the biggest questions is thinking about how do I contain and organize all my students' materials? How do you contain them? So again, I'm going to talk about the 2 different ways. So if your child is going to be a stationary learner, which means they're going to be at the same spot every time they log in for distance learning. Thinking about when you contain and organize their materials, you'll want to think about a desk or a specific table or the counter, maybe at the kitchen. You'll want to have some kind of basket that's open. Don't worry about a lid. Keep it open. Just let them throw stuff in there. You're going to help them learn how to organize it. You can also use an empty box. I know when I organize things in my own house, I'll get an empty box like a diaper box or a box from Costco for goldfish or a Tide Pod box, and I actually cover it in brown paper, and then I make a label on the front of it. So you can make your own child's toolbox. You could do that. You could use a file or a folder crate. It could be one that you already have, or you can go and buy one. I've seen some people starting to talk about using like the rolling carts. There's 3 layers and it's a rolling cart. So that's a great option. I do know that, a lot of us try to repurpose things we already have in our house. So if you don't already have one, that's okay. Find something else that you already do. You could also use some kind of covered box. So even a big like Rubbermaid box, you could use that if you want, depending on the supplies that you're going to need for your child. So that's if your child is considered at a stationary location, if they're going to be at the same spot every day for distance learning. If your child is a mobile learner, if they're going to be moving from a spot on Monday to a different spot on Tuesday to a different spot Wednesday and so on, you're going to want to think about organizing the supplies a little bit differently. So if you get a box, you're going to want to get a box with a lid that's secure. So one great idea is even if you have an old file box, it doesn't have to be used for files, but it has a really tight snap-on lid. So that way, when you are taking your child who's a mobile learner, as in they're at different sites during the week, whether it's moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, you can easily take that box with all their things in it and take it with them. So wherever their learning station is. In that box, you want to have other small things so that they can organize the things within the bigger box, such as a pencil case. This does not have to be fancy. It can be. Sometimes if you let the kid pick it out at Target or on Amazon, then they really buy into it. But it doesn't have to be fancy. You can use a plastic bag. You can use an old Amazon gift bags, the ones with the drawstrings. You can even use that as a pencil case. You can also use their backpack or their study bag. That's a great way to allow them to carry their materials from one house to another. Again, this is if your child, I would consider, is a mobile or has a mobile station, as in they're going to grandma's one day, grandpa's the other day, maybe dad's another day, and you want to make sure that the supplies are going with them so they're set up for success. So we first talked about the difference between a stationary learner and a mobile learner, meaning is their location going to be the same every day or is it going to move? Then we talked about how to organize and contain their supplies. Now we're going to talk about another really important piece. And this one is all about where and how your student will sit. So let's first talk about where. This is going to be totally up to you, whether you're a single parent or with a partner, is where is this location going to be? Where is my child going to work best, right? You know your child best. So if you know that you're going to want them nearby, then set up that spot nearby. If you know that they are a good independent worker, then set that spot up in a room or in a corner so it's nice and quiet. But the really important thing to think about that I know myself as a teacher, I try to be very conscious of this, is how students sit. So you notice I'm sitting in a chair. I'm sitting in a chair with a back on it. This is very comfortable to me. This is my teaching spot. I've actually tried a couple different chairs since I've been working this summer, doing tutoring over the summer. And I finally found one that's a great height and a great back. But it did take me some trial and error. I highly recommend trying to use what you already have in your house before you go out and you buy something new. So thinking about how they will sit. Again, you know your child best. And also something to think about, they are going to be sitting probably a lot more and a lot longer than they would in the classroom. So even if you know your daughter is great at sitting or your son is great at sitting in the classroom, it may not be the case at home. So again, it's going to be trial and error. So here are some other options for you. A chair, a standing desk. You can make a standing desk at your house easily. Find a counter that's the right height, set up their workspace there. If you want to buy a standing desk, you can always ask me which ones I would recommend. I went through a couple different ones in my classroom. The cool thing about standing desks is most of them are the ones that I like. You can raise them or lower them depending on the height of the child. They also have a swing bar. So that means one foot is planted on the ground. The other foot they can put on a swing bar and they can swing, which helps get those wiggles out. Another option would be, instead of a chair, a wobble stool. And again, these are things that I have tried. I know which brands I recommend if you're looking for a stool, so that you can sit on the stool and you can allow your child's body to rock back and forth. Sometimes this actually really helps their mind to focus if they're able to get their wiggles out a different way. You can use things like a bean bag as they're listening or watching their Zoom lessons. You could encourage them to have a clipboard. So if they want to lay out on their tummy on the floor and do their work that way, that's also a great way. Especially for younger kids or some kids with different sensory needs, laying on their tummy actually helps tighten their abdomen and it keeps their head up. So that's another way you could try, is encouraging them to use a clipboard. Another thing you could try is when they're sitting in a chair, if they're sitting in a standard chair, lots of us have like resistance bands or bungee cords is another thing that you might already have in your house if you don't want to buy something new. And what you're going to do is you are going to take your chair. If a chair has 4 legs, there's going to be 2 in the front and there's going to be 2 in the back. And what you want to do is you want to attach that resistance band or bungee cord to the front 2 legs. And you're going to bring it across horizontal. What that allows to do is when the child is sitting, they can take their legs or think of their ankles, where those are, and they can kick their feet as they're sitting in the chair. But what they're doing is they're kicking against that resistance band. Again, for certain kids that need to get some wiggles out and sit in a chair, it's possible to encourage that movement. We also know that certain learners learn better when they're able to move and wiggle a little bit. The last one I recommend, and some of you may already have this at home as well, is an exercise ball. So this one's a little bit trickier because you would have to get the right size to be able to fit, the right desk or table that you're using. If you do use an exercise ball, it's super important to put things on either side of it so that the child doesn't accidentally roll away from the computer. You want them to use the exercise ball to be able to bounce in place, maybe rocking back a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. So again, you might already have it. You could buy it. They do come with, cool stands and things like that. But again, you don't have to run out and buy all these new things for your children. Let's think about things we already have in our house that will encourage them to wiggle and move as they're working. Okay, so we talked about if they're stationary or immobile, how you're going to organize and contain their materials. We talked about where they're going to sit, how they're going to sit. Other things to consider when you're setting up their work spot. Think of your Wi-Fi access. So I know I've been working with some kids this summer, and it's very interesting. Some kids, their rooms happen to be the dead zone. So, every time she brought the computer into her room, we had a really hard time connecting. And again, we're really trying to think about what's the best way we want to set our kids up to success. And we know if we can eliminate Wi-Fi problems, then we want to try to do that. If you are getting Wi-Fi from the city or from a different router, if you're sharing routers, make sure that you test it ahead of time, because again, we don't want our students to be getting frustrated if they're getting kicked off the class meetings and things like that. You also want to set them up close to a power outlet or have an extension cord handy. So when you're thinking about your space, and you think you have it all figured out, stop and check. Where's that power cord? Because they're going to need it. They're going to need it for their computer. They might also need it for the next thing I'm going to mention, which is a lamp. Lighting is super important. Whether they're by a window, that's your choice. Some kids that might help having that connection to nature. For some kids, it's going to distract them. So maybe bringing an extra lamp in or changing out the light bulbs to make them brighter. We know research shows that our body is more alert and awake when we have bright lights. Here's another option. Again, these are all kind of optional things. You know your child best. But the next one would be classical music. So classical music, research shows that if you put classical music on at a certain tempo, I can't remember the exact one, but I can look it up. So if you email me, I'll find it for you. If you have it at a certain tempo or speed and very quiet in the background, sometimes it helps people be able to, it's almost like white noise. It helps tune out other sounds. They can really focus in on their lesson. I had a child when I was teaching 4th grade who was autistic and loved the music. For him, it really helped him. In fact, he would walk into the classroom and if I didn't already have it playing, he goes, "Are you going to play the green playlist or the blue playlist?" He already knew which Spotify or whatever playlist I was going to play. And so he would prompt me sometimes. So again, I say that with caution because sometimes for kids, music can be distracting. So you just got to try it out, but sometimes it really is helpful. Okay, another big thing to consider, if you're a house with multiple children, whether they're all in school, one is in school, one is younger, you really are going to want to think about playing those scenarios out about how to set your learner up for success. So for example, if you're multiple children, again, if you're a household with multiple children and they're multiple school-aged children, you need to think about when they're on their computer Zooming at the same time, are they in the same room or are they in a separate room? You have to try it ahead of time because let me tell you, I've been teaching again this summer. My daughter is in one of my groups. She often will go with a neighbor. We've bubbled up with their family to stay safe, and they will Zoom together to join one of my classes. And our neighbor has found it's better to have the two kids, even though they're in the same exact Zoom group, they're in the same lesson with me. She puts them in separate rooms. And here's why. Even with headphones on, the echo. When they were in the same room together, or if they're too close, their Zooms are echoing. And so it's really distracting for them. So when you are thinking about, and it's when they're talking, they get when their headphones are on, it's better, but it's when they're talking, it echoes in the same room. So if you have multiple school age children and you have the option to put them in separate rooms or even, adjacent rooms just to give some kind of a sound barrier, it's helpful. Again, you have to do what's best for your family though. If it's easier to put them all in the same room so you can watch them and you can say, hey, make sure you're watching your Zoom teacher, right? Then you can do that. You have to set them up. I suggest you try it ahead of time. Let's see. Here is another really big one I'm going to talk about. Snacks and water bottle. So again, we want to set up our children, want to set up our students for success. So when I was first thinking about tonight and coming up with my list, I thought about, of course, you want to give kids a water bottle and snack, right? Because you don't want them to say, Mom, I'm hungry, or Grandpa, I need a snack, and interrupt, their learning time. And I totally still believe it's important to have snacks and water available to the kids. However, we need to be very cautious. Water, yes, absolutely. It should be there the whole time with a secure lid because we don't want it tipping and pouring onto the technology. So test the water bottle ahead of time. What happens if it rolls over or rolls to the side? Do you have an extra cup with a straw? Something fun that they'll think is fun, even just to put water in. That's what I use right here by my computer. So if it falls over, it's not gonna ruin my laptop. So water, big one. The other one is that, and I am very cautious to bring this up, but I'm gonna be honest with you, we need to be careful about feeding our kids when they're on the computer. We need to be very careful. It's the same as giving kids snacks, and this is like, I'm putting my mom hat on here, feeding kids when they're doing screen time. Because what happens is that they are zoning out and they're just eating, right? They're not really consciously eating. They're not giving their brain time to register how full they are because they're just distracted. Also, I've noticed, I do this myself, when I'm anxious or stressed, I tend to eat more. I'm not conscious about what I'm eating and I just keep going. So we don't want to encourage these habits for our children. We don't want to encourage, yes, they might be stressed, they're on a Zoom call. They might be stressed because they don't know when it's their turn next to share. We don't want to teach them to eat for comfort. It's not a road we want to take them on. So you say, well, what do I do? Here are some suggestions. When I would teach in the classroom, especially on super stressful days, I'm talking state testing. These kids would be testing for hours, sometimes paper pencils, sometimes on the computer. Anytime I had run a small group and I had kids that were new to my group, I would offer this, and this is what I would do. Lifesavers or gum. Depending on your child, think about their allergies, think about their age, all that. Lifesavers or gum. So here we go. So when I would use lifesavers is when I would do state testing, and I'm talking this would be hours at length. You would give them break. They would do reading for 45 minutes, then they would do math for 45 minutes. They'd take a break and do writing for 45 minutes, which looks very similar to some of our schedules that our distance learners are being asked to engage in. So this is what I would do. Set a timer. Every 30 minutes, they get a lifesaver. And it's up to your child to decide, are they going to crunch it and chew it really fast? Or are they going to suck on it and let it last? And tell them ahead of time, today, during all your Zoom meetings or however long your Zoom call is with your teacher, you get to have 1, 2, or 3, right? Make it a set amount. And set a timer, or you can say, if it's a middle schooler, you can say, okay, you get 1 for each subject during the day when you're doing a quick turnaround on Mondays is what I've seen. They meet with all their teachers. So 1 lifesaver, every 30 minutes, or every time you log onto the computer, you get 2 lifesavers, for the hour, and they can decide how and when to eat them. Gum is another one. It just depends on how your child does with gum. If they swallow it, if they're going to blow big bubbles, if it's going to be a distraction. Again, we don't want it to be a distraction. We want it to help them. So again, that's a research-based recommendation. I've researched it in my class, but I also got the idea from other things that I have read online about and in books about really trying to harness kids' energy and help them reduce anxiety by sucking on things and chewing on things. And chewing on things other than their headphone cords or their hair, right? Giving them something positive. Okay, so if you are following along with me, and if you're not, I'm going to tell you where to get it again. On my website, Learning with Laura 123, under the parent portal, it has the information for tonight's session. It also has a link to my PDF where I have all these notes. And you're definitely going to want to check the PDF out for the next part, even if it's just after the session when I'm done with the live. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the supplies. Some of you, I've even seen, what do we buy for school? What's back to school year shopping like? Are we buying sweatpants? Or are we buying clothes? Are we buying supplies for our kids? Or are we buying supplies for the parents, right? So I'm going to walk you through my recommendations for what your child is going to need at their desk. Whatever that desk is, whether it's a mobile one, in the box that they take to grandpa's house, or if it's at the same spot every day. And here's the tip, because I do see some of my my grade level cohort families on here. So some of the families have already signed up with me for the fall. I'm running grade level cohorts, small groups with kids to reinforce strategies, making sure that they are not falling behind, that they're still excited about learning. And part of my back to school kickoff with them is actually I am making these supply kits for them. So if you're one of my families on there, know that most of the stuff I'm going to mention right now actually comes in your kit. So don't worry about buying it. Here we go. Pencils. Kindergartners actually should be using thicker pencils than most think. So if we look at a standard, I just have pens, but I'm going to show you. Number 2 standard pencil is great for kids. I recommend first all the way up, unless they need help with fine motor. Kindergarten, and again, I'm a former kindergarten teacher, I recommend the thicker ones. And here's why. Most kids are still developing their fine motor skills on the muscles in their fingers. They are learning how to hold a pencil. This is also true for preschoolers. So the bigger the pencil, or the thicker, the writing tool is, the easier it is for them to practicing how to hold it. Okay, mechanical pencils. I do not recommend mechanical pencils, with the exception for middle schoolers. Middle schoolers are much more responsible for the most part when it comes to school supplies. You know your child best. If you have a second grader that always uses mechanical pencils, then by all means do it. You got to do what works best for your kids. I'm just giving you my general feedback as a teacher that has taught multiple grade levels, interacted with kids. Okay, the next one I'm going to show you, I have right here. I only have in blue, but that's okay. These are called Flair pens, and I'm going to get really close so you can see it. They're by Papermate. This is not an ad. I wish I got free pens by Papermate, but I don't. These are Papermate, and yes, it's reversed, right? So it's called Papermate Flair. This is blue. I recommend black. Black. I have blue because I was running assessments and I like to take notes in different colors. Black. What's really cool about it is that the tip, students don't have to push very hard. So it's a great way for them to practice their writing. Sometimes it helps kids be motivated to do writing as well. So this is a good one, kind of a fun thing for them to use. A sharpener. All kids should have a sharpener at their workspace, even kindergartners, right? And if they have a thicker pencil, they do make thicker or bigger sharpeners. They're out there. They're on Amazon. They're at Target. If you want to know specific brands, email me and I'll let you know. So they need that pencil. They need that pencil sharpener. I've been working with kids this summer, as I've mentioned before. And one lesson, one of my second graders said, "Oh, I broke my pencil," and she literally took off, ran from her computer before I could even say, "Wait, let's see if you have an extra one," or "Wait, let's see, why don't you use your Flair pen," or something like that. Because my fear as a teacher is as soon as they run off, we don't know when they're going to come back. We don't know if they're going to get a snack on the way, if they're going to see a squirrel on the way, if they're going to find a pencil, or if they're going to go interrupt mom and dad on a really important phone call as well. So Have that pencil sharpener handy. We want to teach independence. We want to teach them how to sharpen their own pencil. Crayons I recommend as the #1 art tool for kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Here's why. Crayons don't usually break. They don't need to be sharpened. Crayons usually are pretty inexpensive that we can find them. Crayons do not bleed through the paper like pens do, markers do. So when you're thinking about like workbooks that kids are going to be using, or even if you print things that are on double-sided, if they use marker, it may bleed through. All right, I'm going to plug you guys in here so I don't lose you. So I don't recommend markers. Very special occasion do I let my own children use markers. But again, you got to do what works for your family. Colored pencils, I would say more middle school. Talked about markers. Highlighters, middle school. I don't recommend it for the younger grades. They think it's a marker. They want to color all over. It bleeds through the paper. So I do not recommend it. If they need a highlighter, guess what? Most crayons come with a yellow crayon. Have them highlight with that yellow crayon. Binder paper I recommend for grades 3, 5, and middle school. It is not recommended for younger grades because they usually don't have that fine motor. Their print isn't that small yet, and so they end up getting very frustrated with it. I think a notebook is a better fit also because there's not as many loose things out and about. Composition notebook. So if you're not familiar with that, it's like a smaller notebook. It doesn't have the coils. It's bound with tape, really. And you can actually reinforce that binding with a cool duct tape that your child likes. Composition books, notebooks are really important. They're super helpful for note-taking. We're thinking about science, social studies, those kind of notes. Language arts, when they're doing stop and jots, when they're reading and then they're taking notes. Writing, it's another great one. So I recommend getting 1 or 2, maybe more if your child is older, of composition notebooks. Again, it's included if you're already doing one of my grade level cohorts. A response board. Let's see if I have mine right here. Okay. It's okay. I'll just tell you about it. I have all my desk things right here. So a response board. A response board is a way for kids to show their answers. Now, most of you are thinking, oh, that's fine. I got that covered. I have a whiteboard. Well, here's a little tip that I learned. I do not recommend whiteboards. Again, you got to do what works for your family. But in my classroom, as soon as I heard what I'm going to tell you now, I stopped using whiteboards. I do not use them in my class when I'm teaching kindergarten, 1st, or 2nd. I will use them 3rd grade and up, and here is why. When you use a whiteboard, or let's even talk about why you would use it. When you are doing Zoom calls, as a teacher, I have found when I'm doing Zoom calls with my students and I ask them to show me their work. At first, I just was using paper and pencil, no big deal. They would hold it up to show me the work. You can't see it. You cannot see that pencil. So I quickly changed my thinking as a teacher and I said, okay, let's do something different. Again, you could use whiteboards if they're older. I do not recommend if they're younger, and here's why. When kids use whiteboards, studies have shown, yes, they're fun, right? We all know that, but they don't have to push as hard. They barely have to push at all. So let's think about this. When we have our kids write their ABCs or practicing number formation, the correct way to write a number, right? The reason why we have them write 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, the reason why teachers have them practice it over and over again, it's called muscle memory. So we are training our brains by using the same motion over and over again so that we recall exactly how to write something, whether it's letters or numbers. Here's the thing. When you're using a whiteboard, you don't have to push that hard. So what happens is that we are not teaching through muscle memory. They are just simply going. So the whole purpose of having a child practice their letters or practice their numbers on a whiteboard, sure, it shows that you can do it, but it's not, you're missing that piece, that connection with their brain that we find in muscle memory. So here is my suggestion. I cannot take credit for this. I learned this from a fabulous workshop I took. Her name is Kim Sutton, the owner of Creative Mathematics, but this is what she taught me. You get a piece of poster board, cut it down, right? It can be the size of a whiteboard. It could even be half if you want. Does not matter the color. They're not going to write on the poster board. So it could be a piece of cardstock. It could be a piece of an Amazon box. You know, it doesn't even have to be poster board. But the piece that you do have to buy is black adhesive contact paper. What you do is you take that black adhesive contact paper and you put it over the poster board. Again, it's a smaller piece, or over the cardboard box. Then you get chalk. And I know some of you are like, chalk, I don't like chalk. We have allergies. I don't like how it feels on my hand. Totally get it. But let me tell you, they sell dustless chalk. Sell it on Amazon. I just bought it. I tried it. I've been trying it with my students. I'm putting it in my supplies toolkits for my grade level cohorts. And the reason why chalk works is, number one, if it's a blackboard and it's a white chalk, the teacher can see the kid's answer. Huge. Also, when you write with chalk, you have to use these two fingers. Really good for fine motor, especially for K2 kids. Also, when you write with chalk, you have to push, and that's where that muscle memory piece comes into play. Okay, so that was my long explanation about response boards. Okay, last couple things. Counters. So for kids that are tactile or kinesthetic learners, you're gonna need to supply them with some kind of counters. Now, you can go to a teacher store and you can buy the counters. These are called pattern sticks or pattern blocks. Base 10 blocks is the real name for them because it's base 10. This is 10. Things like this. You could also just use things you already have in the house. Paper clips, erasers, beans. Although I don't encourage using food. I would just try to find something else. Rocks. You can have them go out and find, let's find 10 rocks today and 10 rocks tomorrow. And eventually you'll have 100. And you can use that for base 10 learning. Other recommendations I have, I'm almost to the very end, a folder. I have a folder that has the brads inside. I always forget what that name is. That way they can put binder paper in, or you can put transparencies in, and you can slide handouts or sight words or charts, whatever they need in that folder. And then the last thing I recommend, I think most of you already know, headphones, right? And try your best. Try to use what you already have. If you need to buy new ones, then buy new ones. They're going to be using them. They're going to need them. And so we really want to set the kids up for success. So that is at the very end of everything I wanted to share with you tonight. Again, I wrote all these notes down for you. This is exactly what I was referencing. It's on a PDF file. It's on my website, Learning with Laura 123 Parent Portal. Go to the Parent Portal and it'll show you each week's sessions. Tonight's the first one. The PDF is right there. If you have any questions, or if you want me, to remind you, what was that pen called again? The Flair pen, or tell me more about the response board, email me. You can always catch me on email. Super easy, learningwithlaura123@gmail.com. And if you can't remember that, you can just search for me on Facebook, Instagram, I'll pop up. And thanks for hopping on tonight. It was so nice to really talk to people about this. I've seen lots of conversations, great conversations on Facebook and on other threads that I'm on about supplies and where is your child's desk going to be and things like this. It's so great to have those conversations. But I just wanted to share my knowledge, what I consider things that are really valuable that you might already have at your house. And this is, again, coming from a mom and from a teacher. So good night, everyone, and I will see you next Sunday.